potholes were invisible. The wider and deeper they grew, the easier they were to spot. Hell, it wasn't that long ago that the streets weren't paved at all. No, the fiscal crisis was due to a curious combination of hubris and self-loathing, the anti-annexers maintained, the inevitable result of Bath's attempts to emulate its rich neighbor. The Democrats, being Democrats, figured that if the town spent money like Schuyler Springs did, maybe it could have everything Schuyler had. You had to spend money to make money, right? Okay, sure, Republicans countered. But what the Democrats were conveniently ignoring was that Schuyler Springs, a lucky town if there ever was one, had money to burn. The city was flush. It was full of fancy restaurants and coffee shops and museums and art galleries. It had a thoroughbred racetrack, a performing arts center and writers' colony and snooty liberal arts college, all of which generated a veritable shitstorm of revenue. How was Bath supposed to compete with all that? Moreover, why would they even want to? After all, there were other ways of measuring wealth, other sources of civic pride. Schuyler might be lucky, its mineral springs still percolating up out of the ground more than a century after Bath's ran dry. But the historic drivers of its economy were gambling and horse racing and prostitution, a claim advanced by North Bath fundamentalist churches, though the only whorehouse of historical note had actually been located on their own outskirts, all of which explained why Schuyler was full of rich assholes and latte-drinking homosexuals and one-God-at-most Unitarian churches, a town where morally upright, God-fearing, hard-working people couldn't afford to live. That it hadn't gotten its comeuppance yet didn't mean there wasn't one coming. If potholes and second-rate schools kept taxes low and degenerates, atheists, and Starbucks out, then let's hear it for potholes. That was the other thing, taxes. If Bath was subsumed by Schuyler, how much longer would they remain low? Those in favor of annexation conceded that, yes, eventually, if Schuyler Springs assumed North Bath's debt, at some point all town property would have to be reassessed. Taxes might conceivably go up. Language like eventually and at some point and might conceivably had the intended effect of rendering these outcomes as remote and possible as opposed to immediate and inevitable. Now, though, word on the street was that this reassessment of both residential and commercial properties would commence next week. Just that quickly, eventually, had become a synonym for tomorrow. So, yes, North Bath teachers and cops and other public servants could apply for their old jobs in Schuyler schools and the Schuyler PD. But if their property taxes doubled, how many of them could afford to keep living there? Sure, residents with the nicest houses in the better neighborhoods would make a killing and move away, but what about everybody else? Wouldn't they just end up in some other town like Bath that couldn't afford services like trash removal, except with a longer commute? Birdie, who was the principal owner of Bath's venerable roadhouse, the White Horse Tavern, had followed the civic debate with interest, despite not really having a dog in the fight. The way she saw it, she was pretty much screwed either way. If the tavern was reassessed and her taxes doubled, then she'd probably lose not just the business, but her home, since she lived in the apartment upstairs. Theoretically, the property would be worth more, but that would also make it even harder to sell. While the tavern wasn't technically on the market, it was common knowledge that Birdie had been looking for an off-ramp for a while now. She'd recently turned 63, and most mornings, including this one, she woke up feeling like she'd been rode hard and put up wet. She couldn't afford to retire, but how many more years of hard labor did she have in her? A decade ago, the bar had kept her afloat during the winter, but not anymore. Summers were still busy, of course. She opened the main dining room around Memorial Day, hired seasonal waitstaff and cooks who pushed steaks and prime rib out of the crowded kitchen and into the expansive dining room. But all of that went away after Labor Day. She kept the kitchen open as a service, but mostly for burgers and pizza.